Bushmeat. So I'm live with Mr. Wright tonight. And Mr. Wright, what do you feel is the definition of bushmeat?
I was gonna throw that your way. Do you want to clarify, define the terms? But bushmeat, it's all dependent on which continent I'm on. Um, bushmeat can be anything from trappings. It can be some mystery meat that you stumble across in a hole in the wall somewhere in Mexico. It could be something you acquire in your yard or by a Midwestern friend. Um, it's good stuff, wild meats. There's the idea of gaminess, which I never quite understood. I guess is that just sort of a mineral-y taste and irony taste? I don't know. I'm sure we'll get into the fine details there, but what are you thinking, Dr. Breck?
It's very interesting that you brought this up because we just got a puppy, and his sister was shot by some poachers that were killing squirrels to sell to a Hispanic grocery store. And it's funny, uh, there are so many Hispanic meat markets in Northwest Arkansas, which are awesome. Uh, I always like to tell the story of I used to know this guy in the world of horse racing, and he was I thought he was a big shot some because he always wore this cowboy hat, and he drove a big jacked up pickup truck. And then one day I was in a Hispanic meat shop, and he called out to me from behind the counter. I see this man, and he's wearing an apron. He's a butcher. And he was working. He come out and gave me a hug. I was like, I had no idea you were a butcher in a meat shop, but uh,
It's a good guy to know.
yeah, it really is. It's a really good meat shop, actually. A lot of fresh meats, and um, Hispanics have a greater appreciation for meat in general than white people do because they're more divorced from the idea of meat. It's all chicken tenders to white people, and the meat has to be breaded. And Kenny's still getting used to the pup, but uh, the meat has to be breaded and overcooked and everything. And I don't. It's just very interesting, the gamey taste. I always think the gamey taste in a lot of meat is the nuts that a lot of the animals consume, be it acorns or walnuts or the
Mm,
different wild nuts is what I taste. We used to eat a lot of venison before the chronic wasting diseases started to accumulate in this state, and I don't know. A lot of people tend to overcook meat, not
yeah.
appreciating
Oh yeah.
that. That
Or they go crazy with the seasoning, right? And just kind
yeah.
of, you know,
So all these are factors for why people have a low opinion of bushmeat or a low opinion of squirrel. Now they have a new deal in the last few years. They have Squirrel Fest, wherein people cook a
mm,
variety of means of show a variety of ways of cooking squirrel in Northwest Arkansas. So there's a Squirrel
wow.
Fest now, and I have not
Might have to look
attended.
that up.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Look up Squirrel Fest, Bentonville, Arkansas. But I think it's important that we encourage people to eat more of these meats because, first of all, it's going to be harder to obtain meat in the future, and a lot of the meat that is commercially raised is not raised in healthy environments. People don't realize that all grass-fed beef is finished with silage, so it's very hard to get. And of course, the factory chicken is kind of a joke, which is what
Mm,
most Americans feel comfortable eating. Ground beef and factory chicken is what most meat eaters think they are consuming, and neither of those, ground beef. Ground beef is kind of a scam in itself, and then
mm.
The factory chicken,
Adulterated.
yeah, the factory chicken is of course steroided and not healthy for people to consume as well. So when I say factory, I mean the chickens raised in chicken houses and filled with steroid steroids and basically raised in a
Oh
very
yeah.
unhealthy environment. So it's talking about wild meats. I think there's a lot to eating the meat of the flesh of animals that have lived all their lives in the wild, no matter what they are. So,
Yeah, that's a good way of defining it. Yeah.
so I'm going to throw things back to you here, Mr. Wright, in a second, and just briefly discuss some of your experiences with this for why the listener might find the meat to be healthful and delectable.
Yeah, so I'm definitely more on the connoisseur side, um I don't turn anything down, right? I'll try anything. Um which is something I don't share with my white counterparts. I find that they are very squeamish to the umpteenth degree, to the point where they won't even try cow tongue. They won't try cow heart. This is all really like lower level, entry point sort of stuff. But I've tried an assortment of things. I've had armadillo in El Salvador. I've had various rodents in Guatemala. I've had any number of sea creatures, that like if you've ever tried a sea squirt, you'll it was probably the nastiest thing I ever tried, but it's like wine, you appreciate it anyways. um what else? Iguana eggs. I've hunted mainly small game around here. I oddly enough, I haven't shot a deer myself. I won't claim that pedigree, but I've eaten squirrel, I've eaten deer, I've eaten pretty much anything I could get my hands on. And part of it is just I appreciate I like eating animals at the end of the day. So, and there's stories behind this stuff too. There's, how you come upon these things, and who it is that's offering it to you, and I think there's a respect afforded to you, when you're willing to try somebody's delicacies, and not be squeamish about it or squirmish, just man up and eat it, but you try to lead a horse to water, and rarely people will take you up on it or even try something new.
Yeah, it's very interesting how pedestrian people's tastes are and how narrow their interests are anymore. But the whole province of being an intellectual is expanding one's horizon. So we are, in that category
Yeah,
of
definitely. We're definitely
intellectuals.
eccentric.
And but I'm very interested
Excuse
in,
me.
what is healthy as well, which I believe a lot of these meats are to be more healthy
Mm.
for
Yeah.
the people in general to eat, and people, and having access to them. And a lot of people criticized a lot of the animals that people ate in the past, like armadillo, Hoover hog. They called it Hoover hog in the Depression,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. I'm aware
groundhog.
of that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. That was because Hoover had all these programs for you know offering some alternatives, in the case of
Mm.
economic alternatives for the hard
Yeah.
time.
I believe it was sort of a it was almost an an insult to him, given the down times where one had to scoop up roadkill, so the story goes, and armadillo was among them, thus the Hoover pig. But yeah, I'm familiar with that. It's actually pretty good, it's apt. It tastes like pork. Most things taste like chicken.
And of course, we were raised, and I used to interview a lot of older folks that had been raised as well on because at that time we didn't have armadillos around here, so a lot of people ate raccoons and groundhogs,
Mm.
and everyone,
Oh,
you know, found said later on, their descendants said they found it too greasy, which
mm.
I think has to do with the amount of exertion you go through in a day. Because I'm a big fan of grease, but I work
Yeah,
more than the average person, and I don't think
yeah,
everybody needs a lot of grease or that grease is healthy for everybody. But when I'm working with the Amish, for example, and we're putting in a dawn to dark, which we don't do every day, we like to do a little extra grease. And
yeah.
the
I've heard
Amish,
that of woodchuck.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Amish were actually asking me about how to cook raccoon, and I
Mm.
told them, I'm not an expert on that. The guy who taught me to trap, who is actually the protagonist for Black House Rock,
Mm.
and he's still around. Uh, I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he's an expert on cooking that. So I told the Amish, go over and talk to him. He'll teach you how to cook coon
That
effectively.
was my experience with you say the groundhog is is greasy. I've heard the same. I'd love to try it, but that was my experience with cuy or what is it? Guinea pig, right? Which is a Peruvian thing. It's you've got a bed of like like finger potatoes and corn, like corn, and they do a whole thing with it. But that's some good stuff, and that's real greasy. I think rabbit can be greasy too, a little bit to an extent. It might be a rodent thing.
Well, rabbit tends to be a little dry, at least with the cottontails in Missouri area. Um,
Yeah,
a lot of people
I
add.
actually think I got tularemia. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the issue. You can actually starve on rabbit because there's not enough fatty cuts on it to. If you're
Mm.
just eating rabbit, you will actually starve. It doesn't have enough fat to
Uh,
keep your body going, actually. But um, you know, uh, a good friend of mine who I actually was just talking with tonight. He actually killed a bobcat and ate it, and he said it was delicious.
wow.
And it was
Yeah.
known among a lot of Indian tribes and among the early mountain men exploring the country to be one of the most succulent meats uh, at that time. And yeah,
Surprising for a carnivore, right? A strict
yeah,
carnivore, but yeah, I mean I wouldn't knock it. Going back to what you were saying, what's, like health wise or for wellness, what sort of meat out there might have a therapeutic benefit. It goes back to what we were talking about the other day. I'm a big fan of like soup bones, right? And bone marrow and tripa, menudo, that kind of stuff, but then also tendons, which I did some research into that. That seems to be more of a Taiwanese, Cantonese, more of an Asiatic type of dish. But man, that's good. That's really good stuff. The beef tendons. I guess you could get it with pork feet. You could get the tendons. That's probably the most common way that folks would derive that. But even that's almost an obscure, uh, delicacy. But beef tendon, like in a soup, that's just real good. Oxtail. This is the sort of thing that, if I'm under the weather, these are some of the best. Just packed full of collagen and just like nutrient dense. What do you think of that?
yeah. I haven't tried tendon, but I intend to. Of course, the rule of thumb on a lot of this stuff is whatever you eat from their body is good for that particular body part you have. So
Mm.
tendons of the beef, the bovine tendon would theoretically be good for your tendons. And
Yeah, that would
so
be the doctrine of signatures. That's that concept.
yeah,
I see that more in the plant world where it's something that resembles something from the body. tends to be a have some sort of it's some sort of remedy for that area of the body. But I guess that would apply too to animals, right?
Well, that's the theory anyway. There's a theory behind it, but you know, but yeah, I have not tried that. I have tried a lot. I just feel like people waste a massive amount of the cow. It's almost as ridiculous as they used to kill the buffalo and just eat the hump because that was the most tender part of the meat, and
Oh yeah.
and they would leave the rest, on the plains just abandoned. But and then they'd eat what part of it? Well, actually, a lot of people like deer tongue, so they would cut the tongue out of the deer or just particular cuts and just abandon the rest of the meat. Whereas the natives at that time had the wherewithal and background to process the whole deer and make use of it, you know, successfully. But it just seems a
Yeah.
waste to me, and so I'm about to go make the rounds on a lot of these processing places. So this is some good information for people who are interested in trying meats. There are a lot more processing places than there used to be because a lot of people are flying underneath the USDA radar. So I
Hmm.
recommend that you go and just see what's happening with them, or if they could start saving you parts of the meat at the processing places to where you could obtain them, because I think they
Yeah.
waste a lot. They throw away a lot of stuff, and even if
Yeah.
it could be possible that you could buy stuff for pennies on the dollar that you couldn't get anywhere else.
That's been our experience with choice cuts that are just otherwise discarded. Nobody wants to eat liver, nobody wants to eat heart and tongue, and so we keep it real quiet. We don't want the Mexicans to know because they will swoop in on our spot and buy it up from experience, so you got to keep it real quiet. But otherwise, we're the only game in town.
It's
Wife is
funny
from
with
one of them countries down below, and so we rather like being um the screwballs that'll eat that stuff, and people will just give it to you, like out here in the country they'll just, otherwise, I'd throw it to the dogs.
And so let's talk about liver for one thing. That's an easy starter, initial point for people getting into organ meats. I find,
Yeah.
the common way of cooking liver is to bread it, pretty much. Is that right? And then fry it or something like that. I
Mhm.
find I don't like to bread liver. Uh, I don't like to. I think it can do with minimal seasoning, and it turns
Yeah.
out good. How do you feel about liver? What would you recommend the best way to? How does your family go about cooking liver for beginners?
My wife likes to barbecue it or saute it in a pan with onions and garlic and that sort of thing. Just real I find that with meat, it's the simpler approach is that I agree with the breading, by the way. I think that that's a solid approach, especially for um chicken liver, right? And that sort of thing, or even just a little bit, well, squirrel meat, right? And even if you're really adventurous, the turtle meat, you just bread that stuff up. Frog legs, same thing. But yeah, the simpler solution is often the best one with meat. I'm just a believer in just like keeping it real simple ingredients. Salt and pepper and throw it on the grill, and you just can't go wrong with a steak like that, and but yeah, I don't like to add too much to liver. I just kind of like it as it is in its full, you know liver glory.
So one of my favorite meats, which is not, it's rare in Missouri so much as I've found, is I love lamb and mutton.
Oh yeah.
And well, yeah, we eat goat too, but to a lesser extent. You know, we don't want people to think we're Mexicans. Uh, no. Uh,
You would you you might pass off as a decent Mexican
yeah, I do.
just
No, I
until
do.
you open your mouth and start talking.
Yeah, it's a mind warp for a lot of Hispanics. But where I'm going with this is the question of the gaminess, insofar as I'm concerned, is the way you cook. A lot, basically, you cook mutton and chiffon, which is the generic term for goat. I understand,
Mm.
and you cook them very similarly. And I found that just with a little salt and pepper, I undercook them. Um,
Mm.
or so my wife told me they turned out blue, which I ate them anyway, because I didn't. With a lot of this meat, it's more tender than average cuts of beef, so you're going to cook it a little less. I cooked it way too
Yeah.
little less, but just for the novice um, aficionado of cooking rare meats, or squirrel, or a lot of these different cuts of meat. Some of them, yes, do need to be cooked like woodchuck or coon. They need to be cooked a little more down because of the fat. But
Yeah.
a lot of these meats like lamb and chiffon and mutton, they need to be cooked just a little bit less, in my opinion. And a lot of the organ meats as well
Oh,
need to be cooked a little bit less rather than more.
that's good to know. I found goat was very bony. Not lamb. Lamb is a different animal altogether, but goat I found was really bony.
There's nothing
And then
there.
also like, what's that?
There's nothing there. The goat. There's nothing there on the bone, like you said.
It's rough. Well, yeah, and it's almost how do you get it? How do you get it off the bone too? Is the other question.
Okay,
But
so I put
I
it in a
worked in
pressure cooker.
Oh, that'll do it. Yeah. And with lamb, have you found I just love when it falls off the bone, like a good, lamb shanks or what do you call it? Like a lamb leg or something, pressure cooker all the way, right? Or a what do you call it? The crock pot, right? Um, once upon a time I worked in the meat department and you'd be surprised, like how many folks still see a little bit of oxidation on the meat, just like where it kind of starts to get brown
Yeah,
and they immediately kind of turn it down. We've got to mark it down at that point because visually it's not appealing to the modern, consumer. But I'll tell you what, I learned there very young that that's when it's most tender. Like
yeah.
that's the stuff you want. But it's kind of amazing how that information doesn't get relayed so much anymore.
I always buy marked down meats.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a difference.
So let's talk
Um,
brief. Sorry, go ahead.
no, please go ahead.
Let's talk briefly about your experience with meat in Central America. Talking about bush meat down there. Let's talk about iguana. I mean, I don't know if that
Yeah,
was something you experienced down there, but it seems like
yeah,
iguana would be reptile type meat. What was the take? What can you briefly describe for the listeners what that was like? The taste, texture,
yes.
whatever.
So in El Salvador, on the mainland, you've got it's called gyrobo, which is just a really large gray lizard. And it can produce, I mean, the females the you know produce a good number of eggs as well, really good stuff. But it's basically just this like brown lizard. It's not like the green iguanas you see in Florida. It's got I'd say it's kind of like frog, honestly, frog and chicken combination. But then the proper green iguana, which I had in Roatan, Honduras, um, that was sort of like in a almost like a I don't know if you've had like jerk chicken or anything like
Yeah,
that. had it kind of in that format. I had to go looking for it. Like you have to find someone for this kind of thing because it's just gotten so. It's kind of like one of those like turn a blind eye thing. Like the tourists come in and then you know the islands run by the tourist industry, so they really try to clamp down on that stuff. Just to appease these people that know nothing about the ways of life there. So you've got to go into the places that the tourists don't go, as with anything, right? I got real good with that. We got real good with that. You just ask around and you find it. And so we had green iguana there, but it's interesting because the skin is still this like brilliant emerald green in there, kind of in the mix. And it's got this like flaky, almost a what's the description? It's like it's this flaky, almost like it's got like I don't know if you've had like a um texture of fish that's been sort of like dried a bit. It's kind of like that, but it's got this pungency that's really nice. Um, so I really like that. Speaking of like acquiring meats, in Belize we got what is it called? It's this large, jungle rodent, but it's called the royal rat. Um, and they call it that because it was presented to Queen Elizabeth once upon a time, the gal who's got a whole period of time named after her, right? Uh, but she was down there and they presented it to her. So this is the royal rat. So I managed to get some of this, but had to go through. I met sort of a political family in a town, and I won't go further than that, but they were able to make some things happen for us. And that very night, here's this styrofoam container with royal rat and all the fixins, and it's good stuff. It was kind of
That's
rabbit,
awesome.
I guess. But there's, with this stuff, they all kind of have their own minute differences to it. My favorite meat, I have to say, this might throw you off, but have you ever had roast goose?
I have not.
It's really a red meat, and it's got this like lard to it that's just liquid gold. You reuse the stuff. You'd be a fool to throw it away, but just like I guess you can really muck it up, kind of like quail. You cook quail long enough, and it's just you've ruined it, kind of thing. But my wife has always done it quite right. But yeah, don't sleep too hard on a good roast goose.
Very interesting. I've not had it. Wonder where we could get a roast goose. It
You're
sounds
in
like a lot of.
let's see. So you've mentioned Arkansas. I can kind of get the idea just by basic information that you've fielded on whereabouts that is. Is that close enough to maybe like an international supermarket?
Well, there's tons of international supermarkets now in Northwest Arkansas in the Bentonville area because of the large, foreign populations between the Marshallese, the Hispanic, Asians, etc. So there's a lot of international grocery stores now down there.
Yeah.
You gotta
So
remember, Walmart Asia is now corporate in Bentonville. They moved it here.
I don't know if you were able to hear that, but she was saying Walmart in Asia has its corporate headquarters in Northwest Arkansas.
Oh, so you might be able to get your hands on. Yeah, the Asians,
There's
they'll eat anything, my
there are a lot of Asian groceries. Something as we come to start to wrap up is something I've wanted to do, and I've seen this in Canadian groceries. Is due to the international presence, probably from African immigrants. They're starting to sell bovine blood in the meat
Oh
section.
yeah.
And I want to try that because just for health reasons is the Maasai mix the blood with milk and make a pudding out of it to drink, and I feel like that would be very
Oh
healthy.
yeah.
And something else I'm going to recommend, and then I'll let you close it up. Something I've been working on with my veterinarian is they go out and go ahead and castrate cattle, uh, and
Mm.
numbers of cattle, and I'm trying to get them to save the testicles for me to cook, and so
I was
you know that's my plan this year is just I said just have them pop them in a freezer for me, and we're gonna try cooking them.
Okay.
Oh man, I was laughing because you've got a story you wrote called "Save the Last Bullet for Me," and then here you go, "Save the Last Testicles."
Yeah, say they
I just made that
that's
mental connection. That was funny.
that would be a good follow up story, a good
No,
sequel.
I'd be curious. I've never had it. I've never had it. I hear there's a pit to it that you've got to, you'll have to let me know how that goes. I
Leanna
would
says she has had them.
We call them mountain oysters here, and they are kind
now
of a
noise.
delicacy. And my dad fed them to me once and did not tell me what they were until after the meal was complete. I loved
What'd you
them until
think?
I knew what they were.
She said she loved them until she found out what they were.
That's that's often advisable. Just you know, I knew a lot of Filipinos, right, when I was in the military, and you just don't ask what's in the pot. It's gonna be the best. Like they make it in the barracks, right? They've got their little like rice cookers and everything, and they just whip something up, and it's like you find out it's intestine, and you're just like, well, whatever. It's pretty damn good.
Well, and the intestines are supposed to be super healthy. A lot of those mountain men would eat the intestines first when butchering an animal, and
Yes.
I think it's significant that a lot of them live to a ripe old age.
Yeah.
Those who didn't die, in some kind of altercation or in combat in the old days. A lot of those mountain men lived to be quite old, eating intestines. They
Yeah.
would literally try to pull them out first and eat them raw in many cases. But I think the prairie oysters or the testicles are very healthy, especially for men. So I'm going to give it a try and
Yeah.
see
I
how
don't
they
blame
come
you.
out. And I was thinking about slicing them up and just cooking them, kind of like beef heart, which I really like. But in any case, I'll let you close things out with a summary.
Yeah. I think just bottom line is just try this stuff. Um, get it, depending on where you're at. I don't know if you're in the country, trap some things and throw it in the pot, and uh, um or just find somebody, go down to Mexico and walk into just ask somebody on the road, where do I eat some crazy stuff, and they'll be more than happy to to invite you in.
I
That's
might add there are lots of wild game processing channels for small animals on YouTube now, and there's actually all kinds of stuff. So that's a
yeah.
you know closing note to say go just try something new. It's to the benefit of your health more than likely.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Breck. Thank you, Leanna.
Thank you. So we're going to try to do more broadcasts here, and we got lots of topics upcoming of interest. And so, without further ado, we'll call it a night.